Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about two distinct topics. Writer's block and brutally, viciously taking nostalgia out of our tabletop role-playing game hobby, right? Out of our own hobbying and our own collection, right? We never have the right to take it out of anybody else's, but we should encourage others to remove nostalgia from our tabletop role-playing game hobby. Okay. All right. So the reason why I'm talking about writer's block today is I write for nerdarchy.com. I do a weekly article for them. I have well over 50 articles on nerdarchy.com. And I'm very blessed to be part of a very astute, wonderful community of writers who write on tabletop role-playing games and other nerdy topics on nerdarchy.com. And one of those writers, his name is Nigel Sanford. And Nigel wrote an article this week called saying, hey, I had writer's block, so I chose to write on writer's block. And then at the end of that article, he said, please get back to feedback on this article about writer's block. And then he put it on the private author thread saying, I'd really like feedback on this writer's block article. So this is my feedback on the writer's block article to Nigel. And then it is absolutely broadly applicable to a large portion of the tabletop role-playing game community. So when I started reading the article, because Nigel requested everyone to read it, the authors within the community to read it, I was stunned. I was like, do we actually have a writer talking about writer's block? It was mind-boggling to me. And the reason why is I have never suffered from writer's block. In fact, I have the opposite problem. I could live 2 lifetimes and not even approach finishing all the ideas that I've already identified. And this week, I know for a fact I will identify at least two or three ideas that would take weeks or months or years to complete. So as a writer, I am constantly throwing, there are points where I'll say, okay, I've had this idea for 3 years and I haven't written it. And what should be done with those ideas is they should be given away for free to other people, right? And then, so like I'm constantly in a zone where I'm trying to determine what to do with a stockpile ideas. The idea of a writer having writer's block is absolutely unimaginable to me. I perhaps maybe understand where this might have happened in the 1950s or the 1850s or the 1750s, but since the internet came out in 1995, like it's unbelievably, I have no idea why any writer would ever suffer from writer's block. So with that, I was like, but there's got to be a reason. If Nigel's a smart guy, he wrote this with a genuineness when he wrote it. So I'm like, you need to pay attention, Scott, because there's a reason that Nigel is suffering from writer's block. Sure enough, that reason was eminently, it made crystal clear why Nigel is suffering from writer's block in the article about writer's block. So in the article about writer's block, Nigel says, he gives advice on how to get over writer's block, okay? But within the advice for how to get over writer's block, there is the source of Nigel's writer's block right in the advice. So here is, I think, what got Nigel to the point where a modern 2017 writer could possibly suffer from writer's block, which again is just hard for me to even wrap my brain around a writer having writer's block. Okay, so here's where we're going, okay? So the reason Nigel suffers from writer's block is in the article he says, don't get rid of old tabletop role-playing game editions. In addition to that, he says, I struggle with writer's block on a regular basis, and so I switch off with a DM so that we can run this same long campaign together, taking turns DMing, right? And I was like, ding, 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 ding. Those two reasons are the reason Nigel is suffering from writer's block. If you have old tabletop role-playing game editions and you are struggling with writer's block, that means that those games are not prompting ideas to write about. Okay? Now, this makes 100%. This makes 100% sense. And the reason why is old tabletop role-playing games are a bane to the existence of role-playing games and creativity and storytelling. They should absolutely be gotten rid of. They should be sold. They should be given away. Run the newest, freshest, hottest, fastest systems always. And the reason why is when you do that, you are going to attract the newest, fastest, hottest, most creative, most thoughtful players. If you are running old games, and so if there's 3 versions of a tabletop role-playing game, and you go to somebody and you say, hey, let's play this one that's 20 years old, clearly you're going to be dealing with players who are going to encourage writer's block. It's just, don't run old tabletop role-playing games. And the reason why is the new tabletop role-playing games are all sitting on a layer of problem solving, okay? There are many, many problems that exist to telling stories quickly, to telling creative, awesome, compelling stories. The new tabletop role-playing games are they rest on a foundation of problems having already been solved and pulled out of their rule system and pulled out of their narrative and pulled out like gender issues and political, like ideas that we find repugnant today, and art that would offend people. Our old tabletop role-playing games are filled with this stuff. So if you're running a game if you're running a game that's 2 or 3 versions back, you will naturally run into writer's block because you're surrounding yourself with players who are nostalgic and are dealing with nostalgia. So Nigel, that's the solution to your problem. Do not run old tabletop role-playing games. Run new tabletop role-playing games. And, and there are plenty. There's no shortage of new tabletop role-playing games for all kinds of systems, right? And, if it seems like I'm wound up on this, it was mind-boggling to me that any writer would write about writer's block. It's like we're in 2017. Like, we have the internet. There's literally thousands of ideas at a click. Like, just almost any site. Like, there's Chartopia and there's Pinterest and, there is a cause for the writer's block that Nigel is suffering. It is playing old tabletop role-playing games. Now, that's the requested response that Nigel requested to his article. To the rest of the community, same thing. Old tabletop role-playing games are really a bane to our community and a bane to our existence. Old tabletop role-playing games should be given away for free or sold to Noble Knight Games, or there's a few collector game areas out there, now I break my own rule in one area, and that is with Dungeons and Dragons. I own every single edition of Dungeons and Dragons, all monster manuals, but I would never think of running 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st edition Dungeons and Dragons. Those games are not for running for players. Those games are for keeping as a memory of Gary Gygax and to honor his memory. They are memorials. Old tabletop role-playing games, if you must keep them, they are as a memorial purpose only. They should never be run. Never, ever, ever be run. And I do think overall that people who are out there are running older tabletop role-playing games are, in my opinion, harming the hobby, in that when you're in a game shop or when you're going to your friends and say, let's play a tabletop role-playing game, and then you truck out a game that's 5, 10, 15, 20 years old, and they see art that has problems, from a gender perspective or from, just that's clearly not woke, okay? Then they think that that's the hobby, and it's not. Fate Accelerated is a mind-blowingly amazing free tabletop role-playing game that can be used to run in any world. It's completely free, right? It's amazing, and you can teach it to any player in 30 minutes. Like, why on earth would anybody ever touch, again, Dungeon World, Mouse Guard, and FFG's new Star Wars game, or there's just so many, like, the list goes on and on. Phoenix Down, and like, there's just hundreds of awesome new tabletop role-playing games. So if you go back to old versions, old tabletop role-playing game versions, you're giving a picture of our hobby to players that just isn't accurate, right? Like, we as a hobby and a community are embracing new gender politics. We're embracing new political spectrums. We're embracing all kinds of things, and the way that we as a hobby are getting rid of our old problems is evident in new systems and preserved in old tabletop role-playing game editions. So that is, Nigel, that's the source of your writer's block. I was stunned to see an article on nerdarchy.com saying that you had writer's block, because it's just unthinkable to me that any writer today would get writer's block. But this is absolutely the source of your writer's block. Sell all your old tabletop role-playing game editions, buy the newest version, or run the same world with Fate Accelerated, which the conversion is virtually limited. It's super simple and super free, and not only will that aid in making sure you never get writer's block again, and I can promise you this because I can't even approach writing half the ideas that I already have, because I deal with new games, and not because I'm creative. I know for a fact, Nigel, that I don't have any more creative ideas than you do. I've seen your writing online. You have. I'm stunned that you would say that writer's block exists for a writer in 2017. So trust me, just get rid of all your old tabletop role-playing games. Start running modern games. You will attract new players that are interested in new editions and interested in new ideas, and you will, with very everybody you will reach a point where you will never say the words writer's block again. Thank you very much, everybody out there. Everybody else out there, I would just really encourage you, take your old tabletop role-playing games and do the following. Give them away for free, sell them on Noble Knight Games, or if they're unbelievably precious to you and you cannot abide getting rid of them, okay? One, absolutely sell all the source books. Source books are junk. They make all tabletop role-playing games worse, okay? So keep your core rule books and put them on a shelf, right? And keep them as a memorial. And then you could go and look at them and compare them to other tabletop role-playing games just to see what it was like in the old days. But do not ever run, a 5, 10, 20-year-old tabletop role-playing game. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do you any good, and it certainly doesn't do the hobby or the community any good. Just my take. Take care, everybody.